This week we're looking at a semi-automatic handgun that holds 15 rounds of 9mm and has about a 4-inch barrel. Sound familiar? Well, you might be surprised that it's not one of those new polymer frame contract guns. Instead, we're looking at the SIG P229 Legion series pistol, a gun that I wasn't sure I was going to like, but since I picked it up, I haven't been able to put it down. I'm Joe Kurtenbach, this is Lock, Stock, and Barrel. Hey guys, as I mentioned, I wanted to talk today about a gun that I really wasn't sure if I was going to like, but I haven't been able to put it down, and that's the SIG Sauer P229 Legion. Now, a little bit of history about the SIG P229. Of course, it's a derivative of SIG's P series of traditional double-action pistols. It came after the 226, the 228. Really, everything kind of happened for the 229 in the early 1990s. What was going on at that time? Well, law enforcement was starting to move in earnest away from revolvers and towards semi-automatic firearms. The .40 Smith & Wesson cartridge had just been introduced, and the .357 SIG cartridge was not far away, and these are all important because basically what happened is as .40 Smith & Wesson started really gaining adoption, of course, you needed a bit of a tougher, more durable firearm to keep up with the higher pressures and the higher recoil of the .40 Smith & Wesson compared to the 9mm Luger. One solution for that came from SIG in the form of the P229, which was a more compact model of their traditional double-action firearms, but it also did something that previous models had not done, and that was instead of using a two-piece slide assembly, they used a single CNC machine slide. And so this was a big chunk of metal to really help absorb that power, that recoil of the .40 Smith & Wesson, and it was originally introduced in .40 Smith & Wesson. Another thing, interesting note about the 229 is that unlike the previous 228, 226, basically all SIG guns, this was the first one with parts made here in the USA. All the other guns had been imported, primarily from Germany at this time, but the 229 was the first one that had its slide assembly machined in New Hampshire in the USA. So the first step towards SIG becoming an American manufacturer, which of course today it's a big one, and it just won the Army contract with its P320, so it is now a primary US manufacturer, but it all kind of started right here with the 229. I also mentioned that the .357 SIG was going to be important because remember at this time, there's a lot of resistant police departments and law enforcement agencies at the time also unwilling to give up their .357 mag revolvers. So there was basically an arms race to provide a semi-automatic cartridge that could match the .357. It was thought that that probably couldn't be done or done well, but with the bulky slide of the SIG P229, it was able to handle the power of the then new .357 SIG, which of course pressures and power were even up from the .40, but this platform right here was able to handle it. So since its introduction in the early 1990s, there have been all manner of configurations of the 229. The one we're looking at here is the SIG Legion, but it's important to say that there have been models in the traditional double action, which I'll explain in just a minute. There have been double action only models. There have been Kellerman double action onlys. There have been single action onlys, and there still are with actual safeties, but we're going to be looking at a traditional double action. Now, what does that mean? If you're familiar with revolvers, you know that a double action means that you pull the trigger and that cocks the hammer and releases the hammer, so it performs two actions. A single action, on the other hand, think a M1911, for example, the hammer is already cocked and pulling the trigger simply drops the hammer, so one action, a single action. So here, now this is a unloaded firearm. I'm just going to demonstrate, obviously with the slide lock back, in order to load it, you do have the hammer back, and one thing that a lot of users liked about this is that it was very safe to carry because there was a decocker right here on the left side. Using the thumb to decock it, it actually drops the hammer down, and there are two safeties that keep this gun from going off after decocking it. For one, the hammer is kind of in a resting notch, which doesn't allow it to go forward without the trigger being pulled. And in fact, it's also decocked, so it's not going to have a ton of energy behind it from here anyway. As well, there's also a striker safety. When you use the decocker, a plunger actually moves up and blocks the striker from moving forward. So two safeties in place should a decocked traditional double action SIG get dropped. Very safe design. Now, once you have that hammer cocked, it's a long, heavy pull of the trigger. It's a good pull. It's a nice smooth pull, but it is a long, heavy pull of the trigger, about 10 pounds on this gun, in order to cock and then drop the hammer. On subsequent shots, the slide is going to automatically cock the hammer, and then you have a beautiful, light, single action pull. So those controls really haven't changed between the 229 and other P-Series traditional double actions. You've got your decocker, your magazine release, your takedown lever, and your slide stop and release right up here. In a little bit different position than other semi-automatics that are popular today, but this is kind of the traditional position of the controls for the SIG P-Series. Some quick specs for the SIG 229. This one is in 9mm Luger, but 229s are available in 40 Smith & Wesson and 357 SIG. This one holds 15 rounds of 9mm. It's got about a 4-inch barrel, 3.9 inches. So it is a compact, but all metal gun, so it is a little bit heavy. That does help dampen recoil though. Fast forward to just a few years ago, and SIG announces the Legion series of guns. Now I'm going to give you my honest opinion here. The stamping with the Legion symbols, the kind of club forum that SIG tried to promote there, I could take it or leave it. But what SIG did really well was put thoughtful features into these upgraded firearms. Let's start with the sights. Sights are pretty important on a handgun. They went from the SIG Night sights, which were already good, to their X-Ray series sights with a very bold front sight. This is an excellent set of sights, and it is a true upgrade from some of the more base model P229s and other P-Series guns. As well, they put a Gray Guns trigger system in here. Now, this was already a popular aftermarket component, very smooth, basically a tuned trigger assembly, but in a production gun. So really great there. As well, they kind of made some changes to the frame here. They gave you a little bit extended beaver tail, and they gave you that X series cut, that kind of raised cut under the trigger guard. And what does that do? Promotes a high grip. SIG pistols, these P-Series pistols, are known for having kind of a high bore axis, which is generally thought to be not conducive to controlling recoil. But all of a sudden you add that trigger undercut, you extend the beaver tail, and you've got a really good grip. A grip that, again, is enhanced by another Legion series upgrade, which is these G10 stocks with very aggressive checkering. And of course, the front strap of the grip frame is also checkered. You get a really good grip on this gun. In terms of manipulating the slide, you have forward and rear slide serration. So overall, this is a great little package. And I want to show you one more reason why I really like this. The sights are great. The trigger is great, but it's also silky smooth when it cycles. When you shoot this gun, the closest thing I can compare it to is kind of a nice 1911 in 9mm, because that slide just runs so smoothly. Keeps you on target, and you can see that the rails for the slide extend all the way through the dust cover. Show me a polymer frame gun that does that. And that is why this slide just rides so beautifully on top, really makes it easy to stay on target. So, are these guns worth the upgrade? Of course, the Legion series come in at about $1,400, maybe a little bit more MSRP. The base series, P-Model series come in at around $1,000, so is it worth kind of the $400 upgrade? Again, the Legion series, that club, I could take it or leave it. The upgrades, I wouldn't do without. For more on the SIG P229 Legion, you can go to sigsauer.com. And of course, for the latest guns and gear, stay tuned right here at AmericanRifleman.org.